Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, Ed, aka SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman, aka Ed, and I hope you got out to see the new Star Wars movie, Solo, a Star Wars story. And I have to say right off the bat that this episode is going to be full of spoilers. And no particular reason why I'm doing spoilers for this, but just I wanted to get an episode out and I wanted to give you my reaction to it. And off the bat, I have to say, for just the first viewing, this was one of my least favorite Star Wars movies of all time. I even think some of the prequels were better. And that's a strong statement coming out. And there may be some that disagree. The box office for this was not where Star Wars box office's numbers are usually. And this movie may, if it's lucky, crack 100 million for the 4-day Memorial Day weekend. As the recording of this, the number's not in. But what I see from the numbers does not paint a good picture. And there are people out there that love this movie, and I thought it had its moments. It was fun, but it was just something about it. It just was not my favorite. I think Rogue One was much better, and they did tie in some stuff, and maybe, questions that we have in like the Kessel Run, we get to see that. That is fun in the movie here. So I'm going to tell you some good things that I liked about it and some things that I wasn't so pleased about. And if I see it again, I may have a better appreciation for the movie. But these are just my initial reactions to Solo, a Star Wars story. So let's just kind of dive into it. Why did the movie not do so well? Well, it's been roughly 5 months, give or take, since The Last Jedi, and I enjoyed The Last Jedi. I saw it 5 times. It took me 3 times of watching it before I could come to grips with the death of how they, killed off or whatever Luke Skywalker. I had problems with Princess Leia's final bit on screen. I think that Kylo should have killed her or one of his pilots with him when they shot her ship, and the whole Mary Poppins moment. I did not like that just because there was no reasoning. There was no reason behind how Leia could do that she had that level of force power. And we still have the Mary Jane, is it Mary Jane aspect, I think they're calling it, where Rey is too overpowered. She hasn't really had to train that much, honestly. There were a lot of things about The Last Jedi that really angered some long-term Star Wars fans now. A lot of younger audiences really like the films. I liked Force Awakens, and I'm not in that younger sect of, age group or whatever you want to call it, but I still enjoy Star Wars, and I've enjoyed every Star Wars film that comes out, and I'm going to see them regardless. I'm excited for the announcement of the Boba Fett standalone movie, I guess a Star Wars story. I think that has potential, so I'm excited for that. The Obi-Wan movie, I'm excited, especially if Ewan McGregor is going to reprise his role. I think that can fill in some blanks in the mythology there, and I think that would be a good thing. I'm excited if they possibly do a Yoda film. That would be interesting to learn some of Yoda's backstory. That would be a wonderful thing. I don't think there would be anything wrong with that. So, I mean, I'm open to new interpretations of Star Wars, and J.J. Abrams coming back to finish episode 9, to do episode 9. He's going to really have to wrap up some stuff. He's going to have to fix things that Rian Johnson did. And I'm not trying to rag on Rian Johnson. If you listen to my last episode, I talked about that in previous episodes. There are some pluses to The Last Jedi. I was talking with a good friend of mine, and he really has been a Star Wars fan for life, just like me. And he was really turned off by The Last Jedi, and I can understand the sentiment of those who are just out there. There was a boycott, supposedly, I saw online, that people were trying to send a message to Kathleen Kennedy and the Star Wars creators that they do not like the way Star Wars is going, and that's mainly from long-term fans, not this generation per se coming up that are just being introduced to Star Wars. I mean, they know some of the older movies and all that, and some maybe there's, a good cross-section of people, because some were born around when the prequels came out, some weren't, some were way before, most of us were way before the prequels, and I still will defend the prequels. I think they were good. They were still George Lucas's vision, and I like that. And I don't have a problem with J.J. Abrams' vision. Basically, The Force Awakens added some new characters that were kind of overpowered, and they never really explained things, like in The Last Jedi, Rey's parents, etc. Snoke died too easily. I think things like that, I would have done it myself differently. I praise Rian Johnson for putting a new spin on the franchise and breathing some life into it, but it already had a life that was what, at least through episode 9, how they needed to wrap things up. And so he's really kind of tore up the script, as it were, in a way, figuratively speaking, on what J.J. Abrams had done. So now Abrams has to come back, and Abrams has to fix it, or somehow bring the fans back around, because episode 9, I'm sure, is going to do better box office than Solo. And I don't really know that we needed a Han Solo movie. Did I like it? It was okay. I just really felt like it was okay. And I like my Star Wars movies to be more engaging. I like them to be something that's more challenging and more exciting. But the box office, like I said, was really not that good. We're looking at roughly 83 million for the 3-day weekend, and not adding in the 4-day Memorial Day weekend. It will be lucky to break around 100 million. The studio was hoping for 130 to 150 million dollar opening, and $100 million opening is still a great opening for a movie. But if it's a Star Wars movie, it has to really open much higher, and it has to have legs on it like all the previous movies have had. And, of course, you're not going to get the kind of box office that you got with The Force Awakens. We knew that. Rogue One filled a small little plot hole and still was a good movie, I think, all in all. If I had to compare Solo to that, I think Rogue One was put together much better, even though it had its problems getting to film. There were things they cut out and a lot of things they should have put in. And is it the best Star Wars movie? No. I have a friend who said it was as good, or second to Empire Strikes Back, as the best in the series. Now, I don't know if I would personally say that about Rogue One. I would I'd go a little bit different with it. I would agree Empire is the best, and I would probably say the episode 4, because of just the first impression. It could be probably number 2. Number 3 for me might actually be anywhere. It's either Return of the Jedi or it's episode 3. And I actually put episode 3 in a higher caliber than some people do. I don't hate the prequels just to hate them. I'm not like that. I look at the films, but it was such a pivotal movie. And yes, it had its issues, episode 3, but I still think that Lucas did a good job with it. And it's a movie I could watch over and over again, as are most of the Star Wars movies. In fact, pretty much all of them. Now, Solo, I don't really know how Solo is going to end up. Right now, it's my least favorite. And I hate to be negative about it. I hate to not be super excited. And I'm going to mention some of the things that I did enjoy about the movie, obviously, if I'm going to be fair about it. And I'm going to try to be very fair about it. But Solo was on my first watching, and I will tell you, it was a late show, so it wasn't a great theater I was in. It wasn't the best one we have, so it wasn't, the full experience. It certainly wasn't IMAX or anything like that. So but that honestly didn't matter as much this time. I really think it was just more the fact that I really was not pleased with it. I went in having low expectations because I did not want to have too high of expectations. And the trailers for Solo looked good, but I just didn't go in with expecting too much, because I did not want that all to turn around and I would just be so let down. Like I kind of was with episode 1. I had expectations so high for episode 1 that of course I was let down. I have to say Force Awakens for me was, and for a lot of people, Abrams was basically doing what he did with Star Trek when he rebooted Star Trek. And he was basically, in this instance, he remade episode 4 and he added some new characters to it. So it was enough homage, whatever a bone that was thrown to us fans who have been around forever watching Star Wars. And so Force Awakens worked, and it still was compelling. It was still a tight story. I thought it was just really done well. So then we think about looking at Solo. So let's talk about Solo. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of Solo. So when we talk about Solo, a Star Wars story, we're looking at it's occurring about in the 20-year span between episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and episode 4, New Hope. And this movie takes place before Rogue One. So I was trying to figure, when I was first watching, I was trying to figure exactly when this was taking place and trying to figure out the age of Han Solo, through the movies. So that kind of puts it in perspective. And this is also, actually, to break it down even more, it's about 10 years before Han and Chewbacca meet Obi-Wan and Luke on Tatooine. So in episode 4, A New Hope. So that kind of narrows it down for you there to let you know some of the things that I liked about the film. Donald Glover was one of the best people in the film, and him playing Lando Calrissian, he did a great job of that. I mean, about as good as I think you could play Lando, a young Lando. I wasn't impressed so much by Han Solo's character. Maybe it's that Harrison Ford's performance is so iconic, and it's hard to see anybody kind of take up that mantle of Han Solo. Or maybe it was the fact that I really didn't feel that the attempted bravado or whatever that Alden Ehrenreich, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, I didn't feel the bravado that he was trying to do. I know he was trying to do the Han Solo character justice, and I give him credit for that. It's big shoes to fill, really big shoes to fill, of Harrison Ford, and he has to take that character, keep that character the same, but, I mean, because you have to see the evolution of Han Solo, but he has to kind of make it his own, and he didn't do that enough, and it just, I felt he dragged the movie down. I mean, it got better as the movie went on, but I wasn't terribly impressed with his performance as Han Solo. Now, And I'm going to skip around a little bit here. And like I said, this is a spoiler-filled episode. So one of the big reveals in the movie that something I really loved was Darth Maul, his cameo in the movie. And it feels like they were planting a seed for an Obi-Wan standalone movie where Obi-Wan and Maul will meet up again. And this has already actually been done on Star Wars Rebels and done well. So I wonder if they're going to follow that formula, and that would certainly make the fans happy. You know, everybody was agreeing, even if you didn't like the prequels, Darth Maul, who was played by Ray Park, physically played by Ray Park in this movie, which was awesome, and voiced by another actor who I believe voiced Maul in Rebels and Star Wars Rebels and Clone Wars, I believe. And I could be wrong on that, but I think I'm right. So we see Maul, and we see Maul with the mechanical legs, which goes along with what happened. And we'll talk a little bit about that, how Darth Maul made it back in. But just as a headline here, having Darth Maul in there with the syndicate that he's going to be running, I just think was really a moment where I really sat up in my seat and said, oh yeah, it's on now. I'm excited because I want to see Darth Maul in action. I want to see him and Obi-Wan go at it again. So that could be fun. That could be very impressive. So I'm excited for that. So definitely that was kind of like seeing Darth Vader at the end of Rogue One, which was still the best, one of the best lightsaber, not duels, but one of the best lightsaber battles or whatever. It's kind of one-sided because Vader was so badass in that, but seeing that reminded me of seeing Darth Maul in there, of course, reminded me of the Vader cameo at the end there. And he had another part in there. Don't choke on your aspirations. I can't do a great Darth Vader impression, but you remember that line from Rogue One. So anyway, Darth Maul being in there just opens up a wonderful can of worms. So excited for that. The Obi-Wan movie that's rumored, hopefully we'll have Ewan McGregor. He's been back and forth about it. And we do have confirmed, of course, a Boba Fett movie that we talked about. And there'll be more on that when there's more information to tell about it. So I'm excited for that. I want to see why. That's something I've always wanted to know, is show me why Boba Fett was the best bounty hunter in the galaxy. Of course, Bosk, which I actually had that action figure when I was young, he was mentioned in the movie, not shown, but mentioned. And there were some other bounty hunters that were in there. A lot of Easter eggs in Solo, and I probably won't get to cover them all here on this episode, but we may talk about that later. And I was hoping, one thing was a little bit of a disappointment. As much as I love the character of Chewbacca, everybody loves Chewbacca, and it was not Peter Mayhew this time. It was the first time really that Chewbacca wasn't played by him. It was played by another gentleman. And Chewbacca, though, the part that kind of disappointed me was that we did not get to see Chewbacca's backstory. I thought we were getting that in this movie, and that would have been a nice addition. It probably would have slowed the pace down a little bit, but I think they could have threw us another little nugget there, and I would have liked the movie maybe a little bit more to see some of Kashyyyk and see basically, because what happens, to see more of the backstory of Chewie. But what happens is Han basically gets thrown into this kind of pit, kind of like they did with Luke in Return of the Jedi, and he defeats that big old monster. Well, the monster here supposedly was Chewbacca, and so he works with Chewbacca and frees Chewbacca, so Chewbacca and him become lifelong buds, and we know how that ends when Han Solo dies, and we get into The Last Jedi, and there's Chewbacca still being Chewbacca, and hopefully he'll be in episode 9 also. But he was wonderfully played by Jonas Suotamo. I believe I'm saying that correctly. And but I would have loved to see a little bit more backstory for Chewie, but maybe we'll get something later. So was just excited that Chewbacca, of course, he was gonna have to be in it, and they were gonna cover that. I just want to see a little bit more. of the story. We got the famous Kessel Run that we've heard that some people say could only be done in 20 parsecs, and Han Solo did it in 12. And Rey, when she met him in Force Awakens, she says, "Oh, you did it in 14 parsecs." And Harrison Ford's Han Solo character, he says, "No, I did it in 12. I mean, he didn't say exactly that, but he did say that he did the run in 12 parsecs, which no one has done it that quickly. One of the people that steals the film also, besides Donald Glover, is Caldo Rissian. Caldo? I'm making up names now. My brain must be fried from this movie. I don't know. But Donald Glover playing Lando Calrissian. Sorry about that. He was one of the other he was a standout character, obviously, and a standout performance in the movie. But we got L337, L3-37, they called it L3, and it was basically the robot sounded female. And later on, you find out that L3 leads a revolt and trying to get all these people freed from this person that's, keeping people captive and stuff like that, making the robots fight each other, like robot wars of some sort. And in the battle, as they're escaping, L3 is destroyed, and L3 says that Lando's in love with her, basically. And which is funny, and he seems to really care for her. And so what happens, he's able to save part of her because she's destroyed in battle there, and they get aboard a Millennium Falcon and escape. And you find out something really cool, because they've always, ships are always called she, usually, like sailing ships and other things like that. It's just a maritime tradition and stuff like that. So what's kind of cool is L3, they integrated basically our brains or a computer or chip or whatever you want to call it into the nav computer and the computers in the Millennium Falcon. So later on, when they refer to the nav computer and they call it she and everything like that, it's really, maybe it's kind of a tie-in there that it's L3 in there. So now that's part of canon now. So L3 is part of canon, Star Wars canon. So that's awesome. We have the escape pod on the Millennium Falcon was jettisoned when they were going through the mall, as they call it. This is during the Kessel Run. And it's one of the pivotal scenes in the movie. Basically, they jettisoned the escape pod, and that's why the escape pod was on the Millennium Falcon there, and they jettisoned it so that the monster, well, it wasn't little, it was a big old octopus kind of creature or something there when they were going through the Kessel Run there. And then there was a Star Destroyer at the end, and so they had to fight their way out of it, and they went through the mall, which is crazy. And they had some TIE fighters follow them, and that was an awesome scene. That was a good action scene. But anyway, they end up in kind of like this black hole thing going on there, and it sucks that big old monster, humongous monster, into it, and the Millennium Falcons like that. But they use L3's coordinates as being part of the nav computer now, in conjunction with that, and they use the substance, I forgot the name of it, I'm going to call it, well, it's from Corella, was the, it's a Corellian freighter, that's what the Falcon is, and this substance they're trying to get it to what would be the resistance, what would become part of the resistance later on, and they used it to super infuse the hyperdrive or whatever, and got away from the black hole and escaped, and so that was a good thing. But anywho, it was really cool to see that part of it when they were in the mall there, and they jettisoned the escape pod so the monster would focus on that, and the monster did, and then got sucked into the black hole, and they get away. Okay, so we did get to see the golden dice throughout this, and they were in episode 4, kind of dangling up there. They didn't really look golden by then, but we see in The Last Jedi that Luke gets those from the Millennium Falcon in his force projection or whatever, hands those over to Leia, which is a really cool moment in The Last Jedi before Luke faces Kylo Ren And those were the dice that were used to win the Millennium Falcon. So in the end, kind of in a scruffy nerve herder kind of way, I guess, we find out that Lando's been cheating. He's got this little card thing up his sleeve, so he's been pulling out the last card, and he's beats Han the first time in this card game, and then later on we see him turn the tables on Lando. Han turns the tables on Lando, and he steals the card out of his little thing when he pretends like when they get back together and they're like gonna have this rematch for ownership of their ships, and Han lies about having a ship, and then kind of reminds me of Qui-Gon Jinn when he's going to trade a ship and all this and that, and episode 1, but it's a little bit different. But anyhow, so we have that moment, and so really Han kind of cheats the cheater, which was Lando, and he wins the Millennium Falcon fair and square. And then they get to a point when they get out of the mall and everything, the Millennium Falcon is just almost trashed, and they land on this planet here. And one of the cool things we have in there, Han gives these dice early in the movie to Kira, played by Emilia Clarke, who is Daenerys in Game of Thrones, and she's wonderful in this movie. She does a great job. She's a good actress. And she later gives them back to him when they meet up again, and you find out that she's working for Dryden Voss, played wonderfully by Paul Bettany, who you know is Jarvis and also the Vision from Avengers. And she has this awesome scene with Darth Maul that we talked about towards the end, and he tells her to meet him on Dathomir. And if you've followed the Darth Maul through the graphic novels, the comics, and especially Clone Wars and the other incarnation of Star Wars Rebels, you see that Maul is the son of Mother Talzin, who is of the Night Sisters of Dathomir, and that also makes him what you'd call a member of the Night Brothers. And Mother Townsend uses her force magic in the Clone Wars cartoon to give mechanical legs and the kind of a lower torso redo to Maul. And Darth Maul is almost dying in the fight with Obi-Wan, and he's you know that from episode 1, he falls down there, and he really shouldn't be able to come back from this, but the fans really wanted Darth Maul back, and he died in such a kind of punkish way after one of the best lightsaber battles in Star Wars history. And so they found a way to bring him back in the cartoons, and now this is canon because it's in the movie, but they bring Darth Maul back. And so the story goes, for you that don't know, Darth Maul is almost dying in the fight with Obi-Wan. He uses the Force. His legs are cut off completely and gone down that chute there when he's falling, and he does kind of like Luke does in Empire, and he goes down one of those little trash chutes or exhaust pipes or whatever, but he uses the Force to kind of do that. And so what happens is he ends up on this like cargo or trash freighter that's going to what they call the trash planet of Lotho Minor, and he's there for several years, if I remember correctly, and Maul scraps together like spare parts and builds himself this like 4 to 6 leg, I think, spider like mechanical legs and lower torso part, and he basically goes mad with rage against Obi-Wan for maiming him essentially in episode 1. And then later, that's when Mother Talzin, when his brother Savage Opress, who finds him and brings him to Mother Talzin of the Night Sisters, and she kind of uses her magic to get rid of those spider-like legs and give him more normal kind of robotic-looking legs and all that. And then she also restores his mind a little bit because he's gone mad, but he still uses that rage and the dark side of the Force to get him through this whole process. And then he really focuses on meeting Obi-Wan, and later on, spoiler alert, him and Obi-Wan meet in Star Wars Rebels, and he's basically This is when Obi-Wan's a little bit older, so he's already got the gray beard and everything, like Alec Guinness, and he's on Tatooine, and he is, and this is when Ezra from Rebels is on there too, and they have this semi-epic battle, and he finally dies at the hands of Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan's almost kind of forgiving him in a sense when he dies and all this and that, and so Darth Maul does die finally at the hands of Obi-Wan. So like Obi-Wan said, I beat you once, I can beat you again. As they fought earlier, there was back on Star Wars Clone Wars where he took both of them on, and Obi-Wan was Savage, and Darth, he was almost beaten by both of them, but he was able to, in the end, in Star Wars Rebels, to one-on-one beat Darth Maul and kills him. So there are some cameos in here. One of them is Warwick Davis, who played the Ewok Wicked in Return of the Jedi. And he plays a character named Weasel in the group called the Cloud Riders, which actually that kind of pulls from an early, it's non-canon, but they're taking some of the non-canon stuff now and mixing it in here. So that's kind of good. But they were mentioned, the Cloud Riders, in an old comic, Star Wars comic back in the day, and all that before the Disney acquired the rights. So they kind of pulled from that too, so that's kind of good. But he also played Weasel, and essentially Weasel is one of these Cloud Riders, and they're kind of the beginning parts of the Resistance in a way, like Jyn Erso was with her group in Rogue One. And anyway, at the end of the movie, we see Beckett, who played really good by Woody Harrelson. Through the movie, he says to Solo, his words are, "Don't trust anybody." And you find out you shouldn't have trusted him, because he ends up he said, "Hey, there's this gangster on Tatooine, and that could be a place we could go work next." And then there's a scene where Han just pulls out his weapon and shoots him and kills him right there. And it's a little bit unexpected of Han to do that, but maybe that's a play on the Han shot first thing, even though I know that's not what they're referring to. That's Han shot first is when they changed it, and was it 97 when Lucas redid it, and the special edition of Star Wars, the Star Wars movies, and he changed Episode 4, New Hope, and made Han not shoot first. He made Greedo shoot first. But there's been a lot of shirts, and I've seen people wear them before, and I'm thinking of getting one myself that said Han shot first. So, some things I don't agree with, the redoing of some of the things Lucas did with the original trilogy. But that's another story for another day. And anyway, so we have Beckett in there, and he ends up biting the bullet, so to speak, there. And Jon Favreau is also in the film. He was that four-armed alien pilot named Rio Durant, and he actually dies in the movie, and it's kind of sad because he's one of the better characters in there, and more interesting ones, and all that. There is a mention of the VCX 100, which is the Ghost. That's the name of the ship from Star Wars Rebels. And you also see the Ghost in a brief scene in Rogue One in the battle there, in the final battle in Rogue One. So that's kind of cool. So anyway, final thoughts. Should you go see Solo, a Star Wars movie? Yes, especially if you're a Star Wars fan, you should see it. And maybe I'll see it again. Maybe I'll have a different interpretation of it later. But for now, it's not my favorite movie. I've found more flaws with it. But there was a part of me that wanted to go back and see it, that still wants to go back and see it. So I'm not saying I won't, and don't let this deter you from seeing it. But I don't know. It wasn't my favorite movie of the Star Wars movies, of all of them, but it was fun. It just felt like it was lacking a little something, and I'm not sure what that something was. So I've got to go see it again. So anyway, this is Ed, a.k.a. SavageTechman, for a Geek Homeworld podcast. Check us out on Twitter at Geek Homeworld. and all our other social media sites, our main site on Libsyn. Check us out. So thank you for listening, and may the force be with you. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow and interact with us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes and leave a review, subscribe to us on YouTube, read our thoughts on Blogger. See you again on the Geek Homeworld.